This Shakespeare guy, huh? Wow, we should get the word out about him.
Hello, Library Land. Welcome to another episode of The Book Isn't Necessarily Better, a podcast where we talk about books and their many adaptations across genres and mediums. I'm Mikayla.
And I'm Roxanne.
We work for the Community Library Network, and we're excited to bring you our first Shakespeare episode. Today, we're talking one tragedy, one comedy. We'll do the comedy first to keep things light, and then, just end on a tragic note. Sounds good to me.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. We are talking about Shakespeare this month because it is April, which is National Poetry Month. If you caught our last episode, you'll know that National Poetry Month started in 1996, and it's basically just a way to recognize the art form and bring a little more awareness of it. So, one of the reasons we're talking about Shakespeare during National Poetry Month is that he famously writes not only just actual poems, very famously sonnets, and again, if you caught our last episode, he writes mostly in iambic pentameter, stressed and unstressed syllables in a pattern, and each line has 5 sets of those, so 10 syllables altogether.
So does it sound like da-da, 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 da-da?
Yeah, like the beating of your heart, same rhythm. And he rarely, in his plays, strays from that. There are a couple times he uses other schemes, other patterns, but mostly it's iambic pentameter. He's very famous for it. The first one we'll talk about, again, it's a comedy. We're going to talk about Much Ado About Nothing, which is possibly my favorite Shakespeare play.
Really?
Yeah. I know that's probably not the one everyone would choose. I think it's just the one that I'm most familiar with. And so it's got kind of a special little place in my heart.
See, I'm more of a Twelfth Night girl myself.
Okay. More of an Amanda Bynes fan?
Yes. I could do an entire podcast about her.
I kind of figured.
But yeah, but in general, I'm old enough that I lived before the time of the Amanda Bynes movie, She's the Man, which is a classic. But yes, I love Twelfth Night because we studied it in school.
Okay, so the familiarity, I think, is important with Shakespeare.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. But I have to say, the idea of farces annoy me. I don't like, which doesn't make any sense because I like Twelfth Night, which is the entire point. But in general, I don't like a farce. And a farce is usually mistaken identities and misunderstandings.
So do you like Much Ado About Nothing?
It's fine.
I disagree.
Okay. I mean, I don't dislike it. Generally, with my Shakespeare, I prefer other ones.
Well, I'll give you a little bit of a rundown. Much Ado About Nothing.
Hey, let's play a game called Change My Mind.
Okay.
Tell me why I should love this.
Why you should love this. Well, this isn't why you should love this, but this is the background.
I'm open to why I should appreciate this play more.
Sure. This play was written in about 1598, 1599, right around there. It's a comedy, and a comedy of errors specifically.
How would you define a comedy of errors?
A comedy of errors is a mistake has been made intentionally or unintentionally that leads to hilarity and eventually turns out well for people involved.
The movie that immediately springs to mind is like a Meet the Parents.
Yeah. Comedy of errors.
Like, what else could go wrong?
Exactly.
I think I sort of hate comedy of errors because they could usually be solved by better communication. And I think that's what bugs me.
And 100% that's true.
So I'll use a really mainstream reference. So like in Friends, the show Friends.
I've seen Friends.
A lot of the conflicts that they have could be solved by them simply talking to each other and not jumping to the worst conclusion.
Yes. Okay. See, I like that because you know that as soon as someone figures out the wrong thing, that everything is going to work out fine. For me, it's a comfort thing because it, in a comedy of errors, it's a comedy. Things are going to turn out all right for the people involved.
What is a comedy?
Yeah. So it's going to turn out all right for everybody. That miscommunication to me is funny until they figure out what's going on.
Okay, so for me it stresses me out.
Oh, okay. See, for me it's the opposite because I know I think it's the anxiety brain. I know exactly how it's going to end up. So I don't have to worry for anybody because I know they're going to be okay.
Okay, see, for me, it stresses me out because I'm like, you're putting yourself through all of this when you could just straighten it out right now, but then you don't have 2 more hours of a play to do. It could be how I enjoy the show The Office, but it really stresses some people out.
My mom.
Because of awkward situations.
Yeah.
So
it does stress me out.
It stresses you out?
It does, but I love it anyway. That one I can kind of handle. Again, because it's a comedy, so you know most things are going to end up okay. I think the key is that things need to be funny, or I can't handle them. I don't deal with emotion well.
Yeah, but I'm a robot who doesn't cry during movies.
That's also true.
Except for Romeo and Juliet, but we'll talk about that later.
Okay. So Much Ado About Nothing is a comedy of errors. So some soldiers return to Messina, and young love is in the air. They're coming to the house of Leonardo and his daughter, Hero, and his niece, Beatrice, also lives there. The soldiers include the Prince of Messina, his bastard brother, and two soldiers in particular, Claudio and Benedict. A romance between Hero and Claudio is upended by the prince's half-brother, and a mischievous plot to set up frenemies, Beatrice and Benedict, is also in place and leads to full-fledged love. So the comedy of errors is that they're friends. Beatrice and Benedict are like old enemies, right? They're friends with each other, but they're also like, I would never marry you. Both of them. For like their entire life.
Basically, they're insufferable flirts.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And their friends, after finding love themselves, have decided to trick them into falling in love with each other. And it works extremely well. So that's part of the comedy of errors. Now there is a little element of tragedy to this as well, in that the bastard prince sets up Hero to be kind of a wanton and makes Claudio not want to marry her, despite the fact that she is very chaste and very modest.
Basically, he sets it up to look like she was unfaithful to him, right?
Right, which leads to a lot of crying in the streets. And
why does he do that?
Because he's a bastard. No, I'm not joking. This is a thing in Shakespeare. Like,
oh, okay. This is a trope.
This is a Shakespeare trope.
Okay.
So, and also just kind of a trope of the times that he lived in. So bastards were anyone, born out of wedlock. Illegitimate kids. Illegitimate kids were thought to have worse blood than your full-born children. And that was kind of thought to make them to act crazy or to be evil or to do just things that kind of go against their family and against societal norms.
Wow, I didn't know about this.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Again, Mom, this is what an English degree does. Yeah. So bastards are actually, I'm not just saying it a whole
That's actually the term.
It's actually the term that is used when you're analyzing Shakespeare and analyzing the characters. So the bastard brother does these actions because he's an illegitimate guy born under
he can't help it.
Yeah, he can't help it. He can't be anything other than a bad person. Anyway, he sets them up to be unhappy. Comedy of errors.
Because hurt people.
Exactly. All is going to end well. Because it's a comedy and not a tragedy, and you know that going into it. Beatrice tells Benedict he has to challenge Claudio because he's wounded her cousin's honor, which he does because he's in love with her now and he's admitting it. And then the whole thing is kind of solved. They get married, the other couple gets married, everyone ends up happy.
Isn't there they dance at the end, usually?
Yes, oh my gosh. In the Kenneth Branagh version of this movie, there's this whole, maze of hedges and, everyone's just dancing, through this huge maze of hedges. It's ridiculous.
That's the opposite of the end of The Shining.
Yeah, pretty much. I have not seen it because I'm afraid of horror movies, but I think...
We're going to do the Shining episode with a different host.
Yes. I think there's a maze and I think it ends badly.
It does. It does.
It's also one of my favorite Shakespeare's because it's very witty. There's a lot of fun banter and a lot of puns, which Roxanne absolutely hates.
Nope, don't like the puns.
Which might be another reason why she doesn't like this play as much as she should.
Okay, Shakespeare puns. I mean, I can deal.
Okay. Even the title of this one is a pun, so it's much.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's Much Ado About Nothing, which in older English sounded like noting, which to us doesn't mean anything, but noting meant gossip or rumors.
Oh.
Yeah. So you're making a big fuss about nothing.
I learned something today. Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's great.
Yeah. So even the title is a pun. There are tons and tons and tons, and I mean tons. Every line in this play is an innuendo. Everything Beatrice and Benedict.
Body humor and
body, A-W.
Yeah, body
humor, but also body humor. Everything in this is an innuendo. The one I can think of off the top of my head is, she speaks poniards and every word stabs. I'll let you figure out what that means for yourself. There's lots of phallic imagery and lots of knives and lots of stabbing. And even their repartee is very invasive. I don't want to get super into this, but basically this entire play is one big sex joke. Like,
I know. So we talk about you being an English major. As a history major, people were not better or more classy in the past.
No, and anyone who thinks Shakespeare was a classy guy is dead wrong. In the spirit of full confession, several years ago, I was on the board of a local theater. Right. But just a local theater where we did, small productions. And I got it in my head one year that we needed to do an all-teen production of Much Ado About Nothing. And I loved it. It was some of the most fun I've ever had working on a show because it was so fun to watch teenagers figure out Shakespeare. Teens, let's parse out this line of Shakespeare and figure out why we're saying these weird things. But I think that as you go through it, because Shakespeare's weird, right? We don't use these idioms anymore. There's a lot of
It's almost like Yoda talk.
Yeah.
The way that the sentences are composed.
Yeah. It's very backwards. The syntax is weird. There's colloquialisms that we have no idea what they mean. So I think that in performing that and sort of getting a feel for those characters, you can kind of be like, I totally understand what this guy was talking about now.
I think it rewires your brain a little bit studying Shakespeare.
Yeah, it's fun. Did you watch one of the movie versions?
I did. I watched the 2013 one by Joss Whedon.
Yeah.
It's in black and white. It was filmed at his house or by his pool.
Yeah.
And it's set in current day. It's fun. It's good. It takes place at a big dinner party, basically.
Yeah.
Or a weekend party.
Because they still use the original language, but it's set modern day. And my husband was like, this only works because it's rich people being drunk and play acting.
But that's what the play is.
But that's what the play is. But that's the only reason that it really works for modern day using that language is because it's just rich people having a throwaway sort of party weekend. But I think the aesthetic of it is really beautiful.
It is.
It's gorgeous.
And the black and white isn't, do you feel like it's pretentious? Maybe a little bit?
Maybe a little bit pretentious. And sort of the cast of it also feels a little pretentious to me because it's all of Joss Whedon's friends who some of them are...
Well, and apparently Joss Whedon, who's not having the best time right now, apparently did play favorites a lot.
Yes. So it's his kind of in crowd of actors in this film. Some of them are actual famous and some of them are just kind of B-movie famous.
Yeah, I don't think the casting was the best casting I've ever...
It didn't blow me away.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that I think they understand the rhythm of Shakespeare really well. I think that is really important when you're doing Shakespeare.
So as somebody who's more familiar with Shakespeare producing than I am, is it obvious to you when actors are just saying the words and they don't know what they're actually saying? Yeah. And how often does that happen?
We'll talk about it in about 10 minutes, in fact.
Okay.
Okay. Yes. It's really obvious, especially when you don't understand the rhythm of what you're saying. That's almost more important than understanding the actual words.
The wrong emphasis is on the wrong syllable.
Yes.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. So I think that they have a really good understanding of the language. I think that they have a really good understanding of the underlying wit. I think they play off a lot of the innuendos in a way where they're wink, wink, this is innuendo, and it works.
Whereas it could be very easy to say a Shakespeare line and not realize that you're making a bawdy joke.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so you've seen the 2013 version. Have you seen the 1993 version?
Who is in it?
It's got big name cast.
Okay.
They might not have been big name at the time, but they're all hit the big time since then. It's got Kenneth Branagh, Emma Thompson, Denzel Washington, Keanu Reeves, Richard Bryant.
Keanu Reeves? Yes.
He's the best in it.
Who is he?
He's the bastard brother.
Oh.
And he's so good.
How does he play evil? Well?
He doesn't play well because he's Keanu Reeves.
Oh.
So does he play anything well? That's questionable.
Whoa.
However, he plays it in a way that it just thrills me. He's just fun. Also, Michael Keaton, Robert Sean Leonard, Imelda Staunton, and Kate Beckinsale. So there's...
Dang.
Right? It is a huge cast. I will just say really, really fast. It has the best scene of both of them. Both of those scenes where they're trying to tell Benedict and Beatrice that the other person likes them, but be secretive about it.
That is so high school.
It's so high school, but it's so funny in both movies. It gets played off really well, especially the one where they're trying to convince Benedict.
So tell me a little bit more about that scene.
So it's a scene where the staging is really important. The group, his friends are trying to convince him that Beatrice loves him. They're trying to pretend like they don't know he's there. And he's trying to pretend like he's not there. But like, they can all clearly see each other.
Is it sort of ignore the man behind the curtain?
Yes.
Okay.
It's exactly ignore the man behind the curtain. So the Joss Whedon one is great because they're standing by these open windows. There's a huge lawn with like nothing on it. And he's like trying to hide himself behind little tiny bushes. And they keep like almost turning to the window and then being like, oh, if we turn to the window we'll see him, and then like quickly turning away. It's really funny.
Oh, so it's like when you're at the grocery store in your hometown and you see somebody from like a past life and you don't want to have small talk, so you just pretend you don't see them.
Yes.
Got it.
So the Joss Whedon one is really funny. The Kenneth Branagh one is just hilarious because he finds out and immediately, as soon as they like walk away, he's like, Beatrice loves me, and he's just like frolicking through the meadow and he's like swinging on a swing and there's like an overlay of like his joyous face. It's so funny.
That sounds amazing.
My husband and I often refer to him in certain movies as Smoky Branagh because he's very like, his skin is bronzed and his hair is like windswept and his shirt's unbuttoned like halfway down his chest.
Like in Hamlet too.
Yeah, but that's just our nickname for when he's trying to be like sultry Kenneth Branagh. We also think that about Keanu Reeves in that movie.
Oh.
He's also being very smoky.
Oh, Keanu.
So that's why I love the older one. For the simple fact that everyone is being like very, very smoky, but also heavily enjoying frivolity. There's also a song in both of these that's in the play that they do in both versions. In the Kenneth Branagh one, they're just singing it like out on some meadow. In the Joss Whedon one, it's actually just like playing in the background, and you kind of don't notice that it's that until I was like, this is a song that I've heard before. Why do I know this song? And then I was like, oh, it's just the Shakespeare lyrics like put into an actual song form. Let's shift gears here and talk about something.
We're gonna bring it down.
Way down.
So we are going from a comedy to a tragedy. Yes, so I did my book report on Romeo and Juliet. So Romeo and Juliet is the most famous love story in the world. Oh, okay, what's more famous?
You know what? Let's not get into it now.
No, I'm curious. What's more famous?
You're probably right. I just feel like actual love stories...
You're just being contrary?
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
There's actual love stories where people turn out fine, and I think that that's better, but whatever.
Like The Notebook? Like, let's talk about this.
No, thank you. Moving on. Fall in love, be in love, and just that's the end of it. Don't kill yourselves.
It's a life lesson.
Also, don't trust friars.
Romeo and Juliet is one of the most famous love stories ever.
Thank you.
Essentially, two warring factions and basically their kids fall in love. So Shakespeare did not invent this story, but he made it his own. So this is an ancient story. Actually, the Montagues and the Capulets were existing names. Shakespeare took his idea for this play directly, though, from a 1562 poem by a poet named Arthur Brooke called The Tragical History of Romeo and Juliet.
Oh.
So he would fail if he tried to turn that in high school.
Yeah,
for
his plagiarism check would be like, nope.
Yeah, no way. I'll give you a quick synopsis. Most people know the story. I'll give you a few details about it.
I don't. What happens?
Oh, well, the epitome of the star-crossed lover's tale, Romeo Montague and Juliet Capulet, are from enemy families in the city of Verona, Italy during the Renaissance. So that would have been like the 1400s, early 1500s. Juliet is only 13 years old. There's a lot of references to that she has not yet turned 14. I think she's like 2 weeks away from her birthday.
Pretty close.
They never say Romeo's age.
It's implied that he's older.
He's a little bit older. His maturity level, I'd say, is like that of a late teen, to be safe.
Yeah.
I'd probably say he's maybe 16 or 17, but it was published in either 1597 or 1599, depending on who you ask. And as this is pretty well-trod territory, I'll keep the summary brief. So the Montagues and Capulets are warring families. When Romeo and Juliet, their children, meet at a party and fall in love at first sight, they don't realize that they've just fallen in love with their sworn enemies. They're married in secret the very next day. But Romeo is soon banished from Verona because he kills Juliet's cousin Tybalt,
the Prince of Cats.
The Prince of Cats, in revenge for the death of his best friend Mercutio. So Tybalt wanted to fight Romeo. Romeo just married his cousin, so is trying to be a peacekeeper. Mercutio, his best friend, steps in, gets in a fight with Tybalt, kills Mercutio. In revenge, Romeo kills Tybalt. He gets banished from the city, and Juliet is going to be forced to marry this aristocrat named Paris in about 3 days. In order to avoid this fate, Juliet takes a poison that makes it look like she is dead, but she's just sleeping. And the idea is that she is going to awake in 42 hours, at which point the friar who married her and Romeo,
devious friar, man.
They're going to come and sort of rescue her so that she can run away with Romeo. And basically they're just going to kind of hide out until everything blows over, right?
Yeah, and what is the friar's motivation for
No,
any
he does
of this?
have a motivation.
No, that's why I'm asking.
Oh, okay.
What is his involvement in this?
So he has good intentions. He thinks that by joining together this couple, that he can end the war between the Montagues and the Capulets.
Does that work out?
No, it goes real bad.
Oh, okay. For everyone, I'm assuming.
So
this is a tragedy.
The problem is that Romeo is supposed to get word that this is what's going on. She's not dead, she's just sleeping. Instead, Balthazar, his servant, messes everything up because before a letter can get to Romeo, who's banished, Balthazar sees Juliet's fake funeral, and he goes and tells Romeo. Romeo runs back to Verona. He sees that Juliet, who's sleeping, thinks she's dead. He kills himself with poison. She wakes up. She sees that he is dead. She takes his dagger and stabs herself.
Spoiler alert.
That, my friends, is a tragedy.
Yes.
Literally, this is what a tragedy is.
And this is the opposite of a comedy of errors. Balthazar seeing this funeral and then telling Romeo that she's dead. This is like the exact opposite of what we were just talking about.
Because a comedy of errors means that it all has to work out, right?
Yes, yeah.
This is just
errors.
It's just errors. It's just like deadly errors.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so this is a tale as old as time. But like I said, it wasn't new in Shakespeare's day, and there's been adaptation after adaptation after it. Because this play has everything. It's sort of like The Princess Bride. It has fighting. It is funny.
It's very funny.
There's love.
At times.
There's tragedy. There's drama. Like, I think the poetry in Romeo and Juliet is some of the most beautiful that he's ever written.
For sure.
For instance, when Romeo and Juliet first meet, they write a sonnet together. Mikayla, maybe you can jog my memory what a sonnet is made up of.
A sonnet is made up of 14 lines. I believe it's an 8-line stanza and then a 6-line stanza. And the last 2 lines generally rhyme. Typically, it's a love poem. Often, it can be other things, but typically love poems. And Shakespeare wrote many of them, but they write one together.
Do you want to read this with me so that they can hear how that would sound with 2 people writing a sonnet together?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, do you want to be Romeo or Juliet?
I'd like to be Romeo.
All right, Romeo. What they're talking about is pilgrims praying, but they're really talking about kissing, essentially.
Yes. His lips are pilgrims, I believe.
Yeah,
if I'm remembering this right.
So, all right, go ahead.
If I profane with my unworthiest hand this holy shrine, the gentle sin is this. My lips, 2 blushing pilgrims, ready stand to smooth that rough touch with a tender kiss.
Good pilgrim, you do wrong your hand too much, which mannerly devotion shows in this. For saints have hands that pilgrims' hands do touch, and palm to palm is holy palmer's kiss.
Have not saints lips and holy palmers too?
I, pilgrim, lips that they must use in prayer.
Oh, then, dear saint, let lips do what hands do. They pray, grant thou, lest faith turn to despair.
Saints do not move, though grant for prayer's sake.
Then move not, while my prayer's effect I take.
So we're going to be famous. But
Absolutely.
yeah, that followed exactly what you just said. So let's break it down a little bit.
Let's break it down.
So
Romeo's got 4 lines at the beginning.
Okay.
And then followed by 4 lines from Juliet. That's that first stanza of 8 lines that go together.
Okay.
Anyhow, 2 quatrains that go together.
Okay.
The next ones are a little bit weird. He's got a line, she's got a line, he's got 2, she's got 1, he's got the last one. However,
and does that follow the sonnet?
Yeah. It's got 6 lines altogether, and the last 2 lines do rhyme. So it's a true sonnet.
So saints do not move, though grant for prayer's sake, then move not while my prayer's effect I take.
Right.
And did the rest of it, were there other rhymes in the rest of it, or do sonnets really only rhyme at the end?
The last two is usually a couplet, and then the other ones rhyme in different schemes. This one is an A, B, A, B, and then the 2-line, the couplet that rhymes, it's got its own internal rhyme scheme.
That Shakespeare guy was kind of smart.
He was deviously smart, I'm going to tell you. Like, that takes a lot of work. Especially to have the syllables like they are. Mm-hmm. I can't even fathom the amount of work that takes.
Did he invent any of this structure, or was this already in existence?
Shakespeare is the greatest plagiarizer in all of existence. Even though we think he's, like, the OG, which I think I've said already.
Well, speak to that a little bit. I mean, I've heard rumors about Marlowe. So what people probably argue about this, but what do you think is true and what's...
And you might not agree with this as a historian, but I kind of think it doesn't... The facts of the story don't matter as much now as the effect of the story. So saying that Shakespeare wrote all of these things, we attribute all of these things to Shakespeare, we put a lot on him, I'd say he's taken on kind of like a mythical form.
Sure.
And I'm okay with that, even if he didn't write some of the things he said he writes. There is some insinuation that he's stolen some things from Christopher Marlowe. There's also insinuations that kind of like some of those Renaissance painters, he had like apprentices and things so... Like
ghostwriters today.
Yeah, basically. But he took credit for it all. And he's not writing, like, anything new. These stories kind of all existed already.
Right.
He just wrote them in a really good way that endures.
Mm-hmm. No, actually, as a historian, that doesn't particularly bother me. I see it more as, like, a movement. Like, if you're looking at the history of literature and plays, to me, it's like saying, like, the Victorian era or the Romantic era, the Realist era, it's a Shakespearean era.
Yeah, okay.
Is how I would classify it. Let's go on to some of the adaptations that have been made of Romeo and Juliet. I'm going to focus on really new ones and specifically movie versions. So some of the most popular ones were the 1936 version by George Cukor, who is one of my favorite old-timey directors. Okay. He did what were called women's films. So very, like, basically melodramas before we had TVs. Like he probably would have directed like The OC.
Okay.
That kind of like primetime drama show.
Okay.
But he was really talented. So George Cukor's 1936 version had Norma Shearer and Leslie Howard, and it received 4 Oscars. If you've seen Gone with the Wind, Leslie Howard plays Ashley. Then, of course, a very famous adaptation is West Side Story.
Oh, no, not my favorite. I thought you were going somewhere else.
It's West Side Story from 1961, which is a musical. It started as a Broadway musical, and I have a fun story about this. My dad was in middle school, high school in the late 50s, and his teacher told everyone that he was really excited because apparently they're making a musical based on Romeo and Juliet that takes place in New York City. So that was the first time he heard anything about Romeo and Juliet or West Side Story coming out. So that was a really popular stage show where, of course, they have, instead of warring families, they have warring
gangs,
like street gangs of kids.
Yeah. Then
one of the most famous adaptations is Franco Zeffirelli's Romeo and Juliet.
Okay, this one is my favorite one.
From 1968. I haven't actually seen it.
Oh. I
hear the score is amazing.
I think you would really like it.
Okay.
I do think the score is amazing. The actors in it are like not actors. Like it's like their first time acting, so you can kind of tell they're like a little nervous about the camera thing. But I actually think...
And they're real teenagers, too, right?
They're real teenagers, yeah. They're not like 25-year-olds playing 15-year-olds. I actually think that nervousness works a lot for Juliet. She plays this very, like, giggly...
It's Olivia Hussey, right?
Yeah, Olivia Hussey. And his Leonard Whiting is Romeo. But that nervous energy kind of, like, makes it feel like a true, like, teen movie.
Falling in love for the first time.
Yeah. A lot of people, I'm sure, are going to not like her giggle in it. She giggles a lot, and it's like a real, like, little girl's giggle. But
like a tee-hee-hee.
Not exactly, but you'll have to watch it.
Okay.
I actually think it's kind of charming, but I also just think that movie is like shot beautifully. It's got this weird like aesthetic, and it's kind of like grainy now because they had to like restore it at some point or something weird.
And it was shot on location, right?
Yeah. So I happen to think that it's beautiful. I was shown this film in maybe my freshman year of high school when we were talking about Romeo and Juliet, and it like was maybe the first thing in my high school career that I really like latched onto and was like, ooh, this is like cool, like literature speaking to me and like touching my life in a way.
Cool. Real quick before we go on, I do want to tell you that in terms of adaptations and giving myth to this story of Romeo and Juliet, that if you go to Verona, Italy, which of course is a real city in northern Italy, I studied abroad in Florence, and I went on a day trip to Verona, which is one of the most beautiful cities I've ever been to. But the big tourist trap there is you can go to Juliet's house.
Can you see the balcony?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love it.
It was built in the 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like an old villa that belonged to some random family. Today it's like a gift shop.
Of course.
But you can go to like the Balcone di Giulietta.
Nice.
There is an area where it is very sweet. You know, everyone takes markers and like on this hallway outside, everyone writes sort of like your name on a tree, like initials. So
cute.
Somewhere there is me and my early college boyfriend's initials.
That's really cute.
2009.
Really sweet.
Yeah. So I mean, it was a tourist trap, but like no harm, no foul. It didn't cost me money to go there, and it was sweet. Now I'm getting to Romeo and Juliet from 1996, the Baz Luhrmann version, which is my personal favorite. And I'll just go over it briefly, but it stars Claire Danes as Juliet, and she was 17 at the time, and Leonardo DiCaprio was at his hunkiest when he was 21. I mean, his hair.
It's
the hair. He can just
it is good.
do a hair flip. Oh, it's so good.
John Leguizamo.
John Leguizamo is the Prince of Cats.
And also at his peak in that movie.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yes. And so he plays Tybalt, so Juliet's cousin, and he has just amazing clothing.
Yes.
His gun is cool.
His goatee is... Anyway, his facial expressions throughout that movie, it's worth it just to watch his face.
He's really genuinely scary as Tybalt.
He's great.
I think he plays like the most frightening Tybalt I've ever...
I think so too.
Mm-hmm. So the way that this is updated in the Baz Luhrmann movie is that it's set in fictional Verona Beach, California in the 90s. And it is two warring families. So they're business rivals. The sons of each family are pretty like amped up young men who have guns, and something's going to happen because if you have a gun in the first act, something's going to happen by the third act,
and
right?
There's a gun in the first act.
Yes.
There's a gun in like the first 2 minutes.
Yeah. So of course, well, Shakespeare they didn't have guns, they had knives. So what is some of the fun things that you see in this movie? Like all of their guns have sword names. Romeo has the dagger 9mm. Another person has a rapier. Just Tybalt has one that's just called like...
It's just sword.
It's just sword.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. This also has an amazing soundtrack, so it's like a tour de force of 90s music. You haven't lived until you've heard the children's choir singing a cover of When Doves Cry by Prince during a montage.
It's pretty good.
Trust on this. Some fun facts about it. Paul Rudd shows up in it again. The man who has clearly sold his soul to live forever.
Yeah, because he looks exactly the same as 20-something years ago as he does today.
Yes, so he plays Paris, which is, Juliet's intended fiancé. He's very charming in it.
He's very Paul Rudd.
You know what I love? So in this, his last name is Paris, and his first name is Dave. His name is just Dave Paris.
Yeah, I don't love that. It's very MTV-like, right?
Yeah, well, actually, the movie starts with, normally you'd have somebody called the chorus giving you the intro to the play. Instead, you just see a black screen with like a 90s news report, just like a kind of grainy TV come on. Yeah. And then you have a news anchor reading the beginning, telling us what's going to happen. And then we sort of get these sort of stressful,
It's very like fast-paced, like testosterone-fueled, like gang interaction almost. Like the first thing is what you're talking about?
Like tabloid reporting, like gangs in LA.
Yeah.
Because this is very clearly supposed to be LA, probably Venice Beach.
Yeah,
so it's trying to look like, the gang fighting of the 90s.
Right. I love Roger Ebert.
He hated it.
He really hated it.
He gave it 2 stars.
But he hated it. He said, in one grand but doomed gesture, writer-director Baz Luhrmann has made a film that A, will dismay any lover of Shakespeare, and B, bore anyone lured into the theater by promise of gang wars MTV style. This production was a very bad idea.
Oh,
which
I love Roger Ebert, but I disagree.
He's wrong in this instance.
He's just wrong,
clearly.
But this is a polarizing movie.
It definitely is.
People love or hate it, but I think it's aged really well.
I do too. I rewatch it as often as I can. Honestly,
I watched it last week. I might go home and watch it again. It's so good.
It's really good. And I almost couldn't even tell you why it's really good. I just love...
It has a lot of heart.
It does. And it's just kind of different. The one thing that I will say, and I alluded to this earlier, is that some of the characters don't know how to do Shakespeare.
Okay, so for example,
and I love him to death, but Leonardo DiCaprio, he's bad at Shakespeare. He screams a lot of things that probably shouldn't be screamed because
like fire in the theater.
Yeah. No, more like just you don't get a feel for the language when he's just screaming all of his dialogue.
It's just, I have a lot of emotions.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's other characters who do that too. But him and Claire Danes especially, they're both really young in this film, and I don't think they've
sweet together. And
I don't think they've had a ton of training or a lot of... I don't think Baz Luhrmann cared a lot about like the authenticity of the like words. I think he cared a lot about like the spectacle of it, which is what I love in a Baz Luhrmann film.
And he 100% succeeds at.
Yeah. It's got a lot of really cool like the crucifixes and like the...
Yeah, so like, very like 90s, 1990s Los Angeles culture. Mm-hmm. It's perfect.
Yeah, it's a beautiful film. Just some of those people don't totally get Shakespeare. But it's okay, because I love the rest of it.
Mm-hmm. I particularly love the actor who does Mercutio.
Okay,
his best friend.
Me too.
He looks wonderful at the costume party, because they meet at a costume party, which... is so in the original play they meet at a masquerade, which is kind of like more you'd just be wearing a mask over your face. You wouldn't necessarily be wearing different clothing.
Would you be wearing nicer clothing than we would wear to a thing though?
You were wearing your party clothes. Yeah, but when people only had like 3 dresses.
Oh, I think most of these people are rich though. Wouldn't they have like nice dresses to wear to
Okay, they'd have like 9 dresses.
Okay. There you go. So you wear the best of your 9 dresses.
Yeah.
And hopefully it's not the one that people saw you in last season.
Yeah, but then you're wearing a mask. So if you think about like, if you go to Venice, they have their carnival days and then they dress up in sort of fancy clothing and they wear masks.
Very Mardi Gras. Yeah. In fact, this whole movie is kind of very Mardi Gras.
Yeah, it is.
In a weird way.
And Carnival is basically Mardi Gras. So that makes sense.
It all works.
I do really enjoy at the party that they meet at. So it's thrown by the Capulets. And Romeo shows up as a knight. And Juliet is an angel.
Aww.
And Paul Rudd is an astronaut. And I love that.
I love how, like, out of place he is in that scene.
I know. Isn't he out of place, Mikayla?
He is out of place.
It's like that's purposeful or something.
It's almost like Baz Luhrmann actually did something on purpose.
Yeah. I also love Juliet's mom in this movie.
I have mixed feelings about her. Sometimes I love her and sometimes I'm like, stop.
I mean, you love to hate her.
Yes. Yeah. She's great.
I also love the friar in this movie.
I do too. He's less of a devious friar in this than I mean, he's still devious. And
see, I disagree. I don't think he's devious.
I think
How is he devious? I think he's kind of dumb, but he has good intentions. Yeah, but I don't think he's devious. I think he thinks he's going to help.
Okay, I think that if he thinks he's going to help, he's an idiot.
I didn't say he's a smart friar. I said that he's a well-intentioned friar.
Like, I'm going to marry you two in secret. You're obviously too young to get married without your parents' permission. And also, your parents hate each other. But I'm going to do this. You guys go off, have a fun wedding night, and later on I'll try to explain...
And I'm going to give poison to this teenage girl.
Yeah, later on I'll try to explain to your families what I've done, and then I'm going to fake poison a teenage girl. And
he would be in prison so quick today. Oh my god.
So anyway, so maybe he's not devious, but he is a bumbling idiot at the very least.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Okay. I like him still. He's one of the ones in that who I do really think has a handle on the language.
I would suspect that he's a classical actor because we haven't seen him before.
Yeah.
So I don't know, he has a seriousness about him that makes me think that he is taking this very earnestly.
He's got gravitas, for sure.
Sure does. Mm-hmm. And he can wear a Hawaiian shirt. Actually, a lot of Hawaiian shirts in
There's tons of Hawaii. So the thing between like the two gangs I say, but you know, the
families.
Two families, they've both kind of got an aesthetic, and the Capulets are more like almost like Latin Catholic, right? So there's a lot of like Mother Mary imagery. There's a lot of black, green, red, yellow sorts of costuming, like the leather vests and things like that. The Montagues are almost always in just like Hawaiian shirts over wife beaters.
Yeah.
That's like their aesthetic.
They're like beach bums.
They're beach bums. Yeah. But there's a very like definite line drawn in the costuming.
Yeah. And I think you get the feeling that maybe Juliet's family is old money.
Yes. And his is new money.
That would make sense.
Yeah,
to me.
for sure.
Mm-hmm. And it in the movie Montague construction. So
yeah,
it sounds like he's
towers at the very beginning that have their names like on top of them.
Just one last thing is, so with Mercutio, when Mercutio has just been stabbed, or in this case, shot, and he's dying, he has this amazing monologue.
So good.
He says, "A plague on both your houses." In the movie, he's like screaming at a sky that has like a rolling storm coming in.
And it's good screaming. It's screaming that
good.
works.
That was real. They were filming in Mexico,
and
that storm was real.
No way. I thought that was totally staged.
Nope. They had to go back and do some close-up work, but he is screaming at a real storm. So you should at least look it up on YouTube.
Oh, it's really cool because it looks really good.
I know.
And it looks totally intentional.
Uh-huh.
That's awesome.
Isn't that fantastic?
I did not know that.
Yeah, so that is Romeo and Juliet.
I'm going to just mention a couple fun things. The movies are definitely worth checking out. Even West Side Story, which I also like.
Oh, yeah.
There's been over 24 operas, different separate operas.
I'm not shocked.
Yeah, made out of Romeo and Juliet. It's also mentioned in the song Fever. Do you know the song Fever?
Fever! Like that one?
Fever. Yeah, anyway, it's mentioned in there, along with Pocahontas and John Smith. So there's some maybe iffy cultural references in there. But
there's also Tristan and Isolde, which is...
Yeah, an older...
Like a French... It's like the French version.
Yeah, basically, yeah. There's also, like, they get mentioned all the time. There's songs by Duke Ellington, The Supremes, The Boss, Tom Waits, Lou Reed. Taylor Swift has a song where she mentions Romeo and Juliet. Mm-hmm. So it is all over pop culture. It's also parodied in its own time, and it's one of the only things that I can think of that was like in its own time people were like, we should imitate this.
Oh, you're right. It became a trope in its own era.
The like balcony scene became a thing. Like it was all the rage to put a balcony scene in your play for like years after that.
Funny.
But, like, in its own time. I just thought that was kind of cool because that is such a great, like, memorable scene.
Well, do you know, even in Midsummer's Night Dream, the play that the ass puts on with his troupe, in Midsummer's Night Dream, Nick Bottom, who gets turned into the donkey head, he puts on a quote-unquote bad play, like a badly acted play within the play, and it's a parody of Romeo and Juliet.
Oh, he's so cool he parodied himself.
I know!
That's what we're saying. Okay.
The Shakespeare guy, huh?
Yeah, right?
Oh, we should get the word out about him.
We should. He's pretty cool. I feel pretty underground. Like, we're the first ones to be on top of this, so.
It's a really cool writer. You probably haven't heard of him.
Little tip for all of you library users out there. There's this guy named Shakespeare.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Check him out.
So this is only the first one. I'm sure will be many episodes that we do about Shakespeare,
we'll talk about him a lot.
We're not going to run out anytime soon.
Nope. It could probably take it. We could even get into the histories. I mean, I'm sure people would stop listening at that point, but we could do it.
All right.
And we might.
Is that a threat or a promise, Mikayla?
It is both. It's coming.
Well, with that, I want to thank you for listening today. This has been The Book Isn't Necessarily Better, a library podcast. That's my co-host, Mikayla.
Oh, and this has been my co-host, Roxanne.
And we hope you'll join us next time.
Some of our favorite insults from Romeo and Juliet. You kissed by the book. He is not the flower of courtesy. A plague on both your houses.
Wait, you kissed by the book isn't an insult?
I think it's an insult.
It's not.
I think it is.
No, she's not. It's not. I read No Fear Shakespeare.
Oh, please tell us, drop us a line, if you kissed by the book is an insult or a compliment. We need to know. Favorite insults from Much Ado. I can see he's not in your good books. This is the messenger. And she replies, no, and if he were, I would burn my library.
Ooh, library burn.
Library burn.
Like the show Lizzie McGuire, they're always like, we'll never be friends again, when you don't know Lizzie McGuire, do you?
There's a literal comedy of errors, which I'm sure...
which I would like, I imagine.
Which Roxanne, we will never talk about it again on this podcast.
I'm already stressed out.
He does play that.
Because he's a...
Minnesotan? It's all frivolity and fun. I'm ready
just
to go.
Hey Nani Nani the way that is true to yourself. Oh, what are you basing that on?
Nothing. my intuition.
Like young young...
I don't know what word you're looking for.
It's a hormone. Testosterone?
Testosterone. I'm there. Okay.
This has been The Book Isn't Necessarily Better, a library podcast. I am Mikayla. I was looking at your name tag.
fun.
And I need to go home.